Okay. Today I'm just going to look a little bit at Surah 6, the cattle, and the other day we left off with the ending of um, Surah 5, the food, and one of the last things said in that surah is is uh, is a monologue that Allah has. Let me just go with this. Take me. Oh, here it is. And when Allah will say, "O Issa, son of Maryam, did you say to men, take me and my mother for two gods besides Allah?" He will say, "Glory be to thee. It did not befit me that I should say what I had no right to say. If I had said it, thou wouldst indeed have known it. Thou knowest what is in my mind, and I do not know what is in thy mind. Surely thou art the great knower of things." I did not say, and then in this is verse 117. This is this is I did not say to them aught save what thou didst enjoin with me, that serve Allah, my Lord and your Lord, and I was a witness of them so long as I was among them. But when thou didst cause me to die, thou wert the watcher over me, and thou art witness of all things. So again, denying Jesus' crucifixion, and as I've said repeatedly, Muslims are the only group on earth that deny that Jesus was crucified. Everyone else, including every other group of non-believers, affirm that he was crucified and he died, even if they deny the resurrection. Now, there are some atheists, some internet atheists of the Richard Carrier type, who still maintain the Christ myth theory, which purports to show that Jesus never existed. But those people, even those people who don't have much documentary evidence to support this claim, even they don't say that he lived and was crucified, which is one of the most ridiculous assertions when you consider the fact that no one the crucifixion was a death sentence that was never that no one survived. Josephus, the Roman Jewish historian, who wrote about Jesus and the Jewish rebellion, among other things, he had a friend who was taken down from the cross and managed to survive after being given expert medical care. But that was only one person in the history of crucifixion who actually survived, and he wasn't fully crucified. The idea of the swoon theory, that Jesus was able to that Jesus either avoided being crucified altogether and his face was replaced by the face of Simon of Cyrene or someone else, is just laughable when you actually examine the evidence and all of the testimonies that to Jesus' crucifixion. But one of the things that's also interesting is this little bit here where it says, "Thou wouldst indeed have known it," and this just goes to show you how blatant how blatant the lies are in the Quran. Jesus made his crucifixion and his resurrection known throughout the four Gospels. You have to maintain that the Gospels themselves were corrupted, which is a tactic of Muslim apologists in order to deny Jesus' crucifixion, because it's spoken of throughout the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And let me just skip to Luke 23, where it describes Jesus' crucifixion. And in Luke 23:39, it says, "And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss." And skipping ahead to 45, "And the sun darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said this, he gave up the ghost." And then it goes on to explain the reaction of the people who witnessed Jesus' crucifixion, and then the decision by Joseph of Arimathea to go to Pilate and beg Pilate for the body of Jesus. And this is described throughout the four Gospels. So the idea that Jesus was not crucified is simply ludicrous. Now, going on to Surah 6, the Cato, it makes more erroneous claims, and it also at the beginning of this surah, Mohammed tries to defend himself and his truth claims, which is something you find throughout the Quran. And in starting at Surah 6:7, he says, "And if we had sent to you a writing on paper, then they had touched it with their hands. Certainly those who disbelieve would have said, This is nothing but clear enchantment. And they say, Why has not an angel been sent down to him? And we had sent down an angel, the matter which would have certainly decided, and when they would have not been respited. And if we had made him an angel, we would certainly have made him a man, and we would certainly have made confused to them them what they make confused." And so again, this is a recurring theme throughout the Quran. Muhammad, people doubting rightfully his outlandish claims, which he doesn't provide any evidence for. He doesn't provide any evidence for Jesus. Jesus' claims are attested to by his disciples, his apostles, people who lived contemporaneously with Jesus, some of whom wrote narratives, well-established narratives that whose authenticity has been documented more so than almost any other ancient writing that we have. And in contrast to Muhammad, who performed no miracles, who did not really do anything to affirm his claim to prophethood other than repeating it ad nauseum, and who really had no reason to expect that people would affirm his prophethood and the authenticity of the Quran, other than simply physically coercing people into obeying him and assenting to the idea that the Quran is divine. And this is something that, like I said, it recurs throughout the Quran, and the fact that this is repeated hundreds of times is a testament to how flimsy the evidence for Muhammad's prophethood and the divinity of the Quran are. It's just it's really shocking that we have that we have people, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people that believe that this book was created by Allah. Now, another interesting part is the the passage that says, "And if we had made him an angel, we would certainly have made him a man." Now, God's deity throughout the Old Testament was attested to by signs and wonders from the time um, of Abraham, where God directly communicated to the patriarch Abraham, all the way through the Jews being led out of the captivity of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the God providing sustenance to them, dropping manna to them while they were in the wilderness. Throughout the Old Testament, God provided direct evidence and directly communicated with his nation Israel, and led them through the wilderness via an angel. Jacob also, the angel of the Lord, was a constant in Israel throughout this period. So Muhammad has to address the idea that there was no angel or angels that provided evidence of Muhammad's prophethood, or evidence that Islam was a true doctrine, that this was supernaturally inspired. Muhammad's inner Muhammad's claim that he was visited by Gabriel is farcical when you consider the description of this encounter, which sounds like which parallels what you would see if someone was visited by a demon. For example, in the Gospels, when Jesus encounters the man inhabited by Legion, he's cutting himself. He'd been cast out of his community because he was so vicious and wild. He didn't have control of his mind, and this is what happened when the quote unquote angel Gabriel visited Muhammad. And this is the only evidence that he provides that the Quran is divinely inspired. And when you look at the actual encounter, it sounds like someone who was attacked by an angel, or simply had some sort of psychotic breakdown. And even when he told his first wife Khadijah about this, he thought that he had been visited by a demon, not an angel. And she persuaded him otherwise. But the idea that you can rely on Muhammad's word alone as proof that he is a divinely inspired prophet is ridiculous. No one claims that a religion can be divinely inspired simply based on the words of one person, especially a person whose history does not lend itself to any sort of credibility. Now, the chapter, the surah continues, addressing some more issues, such as, let me just flip through. Okay, in 137, Muhammad says, "And thus their associates have made fair seeming to most of the polytheists the killing of their children, that they may cause them to perish and obscure for them their religion. And if Allah had pleased, they would not have done it. Therefore, leave them and that which they forged." Now, I I'm going to say something which may be controversial, but I think it's well established by historians that Arab pagan culture, pre-Islamic culture, was not the most desirable civilization when we compare it to a modern Western society that's infused with with biblical values, such as the idea that killing or murder is abhorred. There, there were people just like in just like in Carthaginian society, where children would be sacrificed as part of a ritual, trying to appease their deities, or in Roman society when orphans, children were exposed and basically left to die, and early Christians would take them in. They're, just like these other ancient societies, children were not treated. Children after they were born were not treated that well, and some of them were buried and killed. And the one of the things Muslim apologists cite in order to defend Muhammad is contrasting that society with what Muhammad proclaimed, and the fact that he did speak out against killing some of the practices whereby the Arabian pagan tribes would kill their children. But the problem with that is it focuses on a narrow slice of life without without looking at the panoramic view. The fact that Muhammad actually had pregnant women who had given birth murdered after they had weaned their child if they violated any prescribed laws from Allah or that were in the Quran. So you can't take a tiny thing that Muhammad said that was actually benevolent and use that as a justification for the religion. Christianity, as I said, in early Roman Christian society, Christians would actually adopt children who were left out to die. Adoption was something that was foreign to Muhammad, and he actually changed the laws on adoption. And in 146, again, he addresses the dietary laws that are encoded in the Torah. And to those who were Jews, we made unlawful every animal having claws, and of oxen and sheep, we made unlawful to them the fat of both, except such as was on their backs, or the entrails, or what was mixed with bones. This was a punishment we gave them on account of their rebellion, and we are surely truthful. And I showed you in my last video how these types of verses completely contradict the Torah. God did not give. First of all, God did not give the law in order to punish Jews. This is a completely unscriptural view. These laws, the Levitical laws and the Mosaic law, was not given to punish Jews, but Muhammad has to reframe it that way in order to justify the fact that the Quran completely contradicts the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, which say, as I pointed out in another video, which say that you cannot eat camels. Now, in order to justify something that Muhammad and his brethren wanted to do, because this was part of Arabian culture, he has to say that this was a punishment. Therefore, this particular set of laws, but only part of it, was nullified, and it was given as a punishment for the Jews. When the fact is, this is a completely unscriptural, ignorant point of view, which you would expect from someone who did not understand Scripture, and particularly the Torah. The law was not given to as a punishment to Jews. The Jews were chosen by God as His nation, as evidenced throughout the first five books of Moses, and how God cared for the Jews, even when they were punished for not claiming the promise that He'd given them to the land of Canaan. He still provided succor to them and continued to feed them, even though they had forfeited that promise. That generation had forfeited the promise. So again, this Mohammed just does not know how the Bible works, or what, or the character of God. It's just that simple. Now, I just want to address one more thing before we wrap it up. In 159, he says, "Surely they who divided their religion into parts and became sects, you have no concern with them, their affairs, only with Allah. Then He will inform them of what they did." And this is brilliant. I love this fact, because when this was written, presumably at the time that Muhammad was still alive, the people reading this assume that, and the idea of condemning other religions because they broke into sects. Now, you have to remember, Muslims think that Islam has always existed because they believe in the Quran, and the Quran says Abraham was a Muslim, Jacob was a Muslim, Joseph was a Muslim. Literally, this is not figurative language implying that these people believed in the tenets of Islam. That he's saying that these Jews, including the first Jew whom God called out of Ur, i.e. Abraham, who the Quran calls Ibrahim, that all of these people were literal Muslims who worshipped Allah, i.e. a pagan god that they were completely unfamiliar with, most likely. And this passage, which says, which refers to other religions breaking into sects, highlights Muhammad's ignorance, because immediately after Muhammad's death, the Ridda Wars broke out, which was a set of battles primarily between people who had become Muslim, who apostatized and did not want to follow Muhammad's successors. And subsequent to that, wars, the Ridda Wars broke out, and also wars between people who had a dispute as to the succession of caliphs, and particularly the Shiites, the party of Ali after his death, contested for control of the caliphate. And that's why you have around 15 to 18% of the Muslim population in the world is Shiite, which a lot of Orthodox Muslims do not even consider Islamic. So here you have Muhammad condemning the sectionalism and the factions in Islam right before Islam implodes and breaks into multiple sects. And now you have scores of sects, not just Shiite and Sunni, but you have the Ahmadiyya, you have Druze, you have just dozens upon dozens of major and minor sects within Islam, which, according to this reasoning, would condemn Islam itself. So again, that's just one last point I wanted to address in chapter 6. Hopefully tomorrow or sometime later this week, I'll get into the elevated places, which is the next surah, and is really interesting because it plagiarizes from a parable in the Bible, but like almost everything in the Quran, Mohammed butchers this parable. One reason being that he did not understand how parables work, even more so than someone like Sam Harris. But I'll try to look at that in our next video.